How can faith change your future? Well, stick around as we explore Rahab and the crossing of the Jordan River in Joshua 2 through 5. Welcome back to Daily Kingdom Growth. Today we're diving into an extraordinary part of God's Word as we continue our journey through the Bible. If you ever wondered how faith, courage, and God's miraculous power intersect, Joshua's chapters 2 through 5 have all of your answers. These chapters are packed with drama, jaw-dropping miracles, redemption. I mean, the kind of stuff that proves truth is often stranger and more amazing than fiction. But before we dive in, let's take a quick recap and take a step back of what's happened so far. So in Genesis, we saw the creation of the world, humanity's fall into sin, and God's plan for redemption through Abraham. So fast forward to Exodus and the wilderness years of 40 years of wandering, and now here we are in the book of Joshua. In the last episode, we finished Deuteronomy. We started Joshua. We saw Joshua take up leadership after Moses' blessing on him, preparing Israel to enter the promised land. And today, we're going to see what that action really looks like as they kick off and cross the Jordan River. So stay tuned because this episode has it all. Bold rescue mission in Jericho, miraculous river crossings, and a moment of deep spiritual renewal. And trust me, you do not want to miss this episode and don't want to miss what God is about to show us. So let's get started. All right, we open Joshua 2 with really a covert operation that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller. So Joshua sends 2 spies into Jericho. That is the first city the Israelites must conquer in the promised land. See, Jericho was a well-fortified city, boasting massive walls that seemed really impossible to break through, right, at the end of the day. Thick walls, tall walls. And yet these spies find an unlikely ally, a woman named Rahab. So Rahab wasn't your typical hero, right? She was a prostitute. She was living on the fringes of society. But when the king of Jericho orders her to hand over the spies, Rahab hides them on her roof under the stalks of flax. But why would she do this? Well, it's because Rahab had heard about the God of Israel. So listen to her words in Joshua 2:11. When we heard these reports, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in anyone any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth below. So Rahab's faith is astonishing, right? She believed in the God of Israel even before seeing his power firsthand. She made a deal with the spies. In exchange for her help, they promised to spare her and her family when Jericho fell. They told her to hang on to, or they told her to hang a scarlet cord in her window as a sign of protection, a vivid foreshadow of the blood of Christ, which covers and saves us from all destruction. So Rahab's story, again, it's just another reminder that no one is beyond God's grace. It's also a challenge to step out in faith, even when it seems risky. And spoiler alert, Rahab's faith pays off. All right, she becomes part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. You can read that in Matthew 1. Now, in Joshua 3, the next chapter, the Israelites face another daunting challenge. They got to cross the Jordan River at flood stage. So really 2 big challenges. So this wasn't, again, it's not a small little creek, right? It was a raging river, right? So historically, the Jordan River is not it's not just a geographical barrier, but a psychological one too, right? The final obstacle between the Israelites and the promised land after 40 years of wandering, right? So to be an outsider, it might have seemed impossible. But as we've seen time and time again, our impossibilities are opportunities for God to reveal his power. So the priest, they carry the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolizes God's presence and his covenant to Israel. So God instructs them to step into the water first, right? So the priest carry the Ark, God tells them step in the water first, right? And here's the catch. The waters didn't part until their feet touched the river. So think about that. God was teaching them to trust his word before they saw the miracle. And what a miracle it was. The waters piled up in a heap far upstream. Right? And the entire nation, probably over 2 million people, crossed on dry ground. Right, so this moment wasn't just about a physical deliverance, as we saw again at the Red Sea, right? Remember that? Exact same thing. Right, but it's just a reminder of just an undeniable demonstration of God's faithfulness and power. So the parallels between the Red Sea and the Jordan River, right, they're striking. So in both cases, the waters parted, making way for God's people where there was none. But there's also a key difference. At the Red Sea, God's people were fleeing from their enemies, right, from Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Here, they're marching forward to victory, claiming the land that God had promised them. So here's my question for you. Where in your life do you need to trust God to make a way? Maybe it's stepping into a new job. Maybe it's mending a broken relationship. Maybe it's surrendering a worry to him. Whatever it is, take that first step in faith, trusting that God is already way ahead of you, just like he was with the Ark of the Covenant leading the way. So after crossing the Jordan River in Joshua 4, God instructs Joshua to have one man from each tribe pick up a stone from the riverbed. So you have 12 representatives for the 12 tribes, each carrying a heavy stone, walking back to the camp. These weren't just, again, your normal little tiny stones, right? Just whatever. What they represented were symbols, physical reminders of God's miraculous power and faithfulness. So these stones were set up at Gilgal as a memorial for generations to come. In Joshua 4, verse 6 and 7, we read, "This shall be a sign among you. When your children ask later, saying, 'What do these stones mean to you?' Then you shall say to them, that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever." Man, what a powerful picture of God's desire for us to remember his work and to share them with others, right? So this wasn't just about commemorating the crossing. It was about teaching future generation, because God knows how quickly we forget as human beings. All right, so these stones would prompt questions from the children to provide opportunities for the parents and grandparents to pass down the story of God's faithfulness. So now let's bring this in to today. What are the memorial stones in your life? Maybe it's a journal where you record answered prayers. Maybe it's a photograph that you took that marks a pivotal moment in your life. Or maybe it's even just a family tradition that celebrates God's blessings. Whatever it is, these are reminders that help us stay grounded in gratitude and to share our faith with others. So here's an idea. Take some time today, this week, identify your own memorial stones. Write them down. Talk about them with your family, or even create a visual reminder in your home. When you do, you're not just remembering God's faithfulness, you're building a legacy of faith for the next generation. All right, and finally, in chapter 5, right, before the Israelites could proceed to Jericho, they paused for a spiritual renewal. This renewal was deeply significant on multiple levels. So first, Joshua had to circumcise the men of Israel, reestablishing the covenant that God made with Abraham. So you see, during the wilderness years, the Israelites, they did not keep this practice. By performing it now as men, imagine that, they were recommitting themselves to God and his covenant promises. So it was an act of obedience, trust, and preparation. It was a symbolic shedding of the old life and embracing their identity as God's people. So next, they celebrated the Passover, which was not just any ordinary Passover. This was the first time they celebrated in the promised land, the very land that God had promised their ancestors. So the timing is very profound. So just as they once celebrated the Passover in Egypt as a sign of God's deliverance, they now celebrate as a reminder of his faithfulness to fulfill his promises. And after the Passover, the manna, which had sustained them in the wilderness, is ceased. From this point forward, they would eat the produce of the land. It marked a transition from dependence on God and his supernatural provision over the years to the provision through the land itself, a tangible reminder that God's promises lead to fruitfulness. And now we come to the mysterious and awe-inspiring encounter. The commander of the Lord's army appeared to Joshua. Scholars widely agree that this figure is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. So this figure, the commander of the army, appears to Joshua. And Joshua asked him, "Are you for us or are you for the enemy?" The commander replied in verse 14 and 15. He said, "No. Rather, I have come now as a captain of the army of the Lord." And Joshua fell on his face to the ground, bowed down, and asked him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" And the captain said, the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. Man, this moment affirmed that God himself was leading them into battle. Renewal is vital in our spiritual walk. So just as the Israelites paused to recommit, we too need to take moments and pause and renew our journey in faith in Christ. Through prayer, through reflection, acts of obedience, right? We must realign our hearts with God's purposes. So take time, reflect. Where do you need to renew your heart? Right? He's not only with us, but he goes before us, just as he did for Joshua and the Israelites. Before the Israelites could proceed to Jericho, they paused for a spiritual renewal. First, Joshua, again, he circumcised the men of Israel, reestablished the covenant with God that God made with Abraham, and then they celebrated the Passover, commemorating the deliverance from Egypt. Man, wow, friends, what a journey through these chapters from Rahab's, again, incredible faith to the miraculous crossing of the Jordan, to the renewal of Gilgal. We just see God's faithfulness and power on full display. But here's the thing. God isn't just the God of the Israelites. He's your God too. He is faithful. He is powerful, and he is ready to lead you through the rough waters and into the battles. But you need to take time this week, today, to reflect on your memorial stones in your life. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs some encouragement today. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And until next time, keep growing in your faith. And remember, the best is yet to come. I'll see you guys in the next episode.